Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute with our Ask Us Anything AEC panel discussion. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Ask Us Anything AEC panel discussion presented by CAD Microsystems. Let's get started. So a little bit about CAD Microsystems. We do a lot of things over here. We not only probably sell you your software, but we're also a full service consulting firm. We provide training, help desk support, consulting, and we're focused on the design, build, operate industry. We have a team of recognized industry experts with over 300 years of industry experience. You're going to get some of our top ones today. We are all published authors, registered architects, engineers, construction experts, top-rated speakers at Autodesk University and Built. Well, not all of us, but collectively we are. Our customers call us when they're frustrated with their design processes and technology, want to improve efficiency, add new capabilities, win more work, stay more competitive, any of those things we can help you with. We take an educational approach to solving our customers' challenges. We're laser focused on helping achieve each organization's business goals. And this is why we're presenting the webinar today. So who's talking to you right now? This is TJ Meehan. I'm an expert thought leader in the industry, expert in BIM, Revit, AutoCAD, COBie, FM, spoke at many different conferences over the years. I'm currently the past president of the local AIA chapter of Northern Virginia, have over 25 years of experience in the industry. Our panel today includes Jason Kunkel, right? He's a Revit certified professional, Autodesk certified instructor, top-rated speaker at Autodesk University. That is no easy award to win. He's been in the industry for over 20 years. Marissa Gagne, she has, oh, there she is waving to all of you. She's on our civil side. She's our practice manager for civil infrastructure, over 20 years of experience. She's certified in AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Bluebeam, instructing all of those things, and specializes in our civil products, Civil 3D, Land Desktop, Map 3D, and anything GIS related. Purvi's with us today. She's our practice manager for architecture, a registered architect, LEED accredited professional. She is also a certified professional in Revit, and certainly an expert in Revit with over 15 years of experience in the architecture industry. She's also a member of the Autodesk Expert Elite program. That's a very difficult program to get into, and congrats to Purvi for earning that earlier this year. Chris Lindo's with us. He is also a certified professional. Bluebeam, he is our in-house Bluebeam expert. He's an expert on all things BIM 360 as well. He's been a speaker at many different conferences, has over 10 years of experience in the industry, came from being a BIM manager at some very big firms, MEP firms. And then rounding it out today, Eden Davis is our CAD Care program manager. She is an expert in help desk. She's a wonderful personality. You probably have engaged with her if you've called or emailed our help desk before. And she's going to be joining us today. She has some really good stuff to talk about, in fact. Okay, so you've met our experts. They're here with us today. I'm going to get us started. We've had some questions already submitted beforehand. And so I'm going to jump into some of those questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Purvi to answer this first one. So Purvi, the first question we have from Daniel is, what process would you recommend when modeling a proposed addition to an existing house? I have the existing house modeled. Portions of the existing roof and walls will be demolished. Would the existing roof models need to be broken apart in order to show demolished? Any other tricks you can share on this? I think, Purvi, you wanted me to share a link on that.
Yeah, so I give a webinar. Actually, it was just gave it on Wednesday on Revit for existing buildings. So definitely that's something that you should take a look at. It'll have lots of tips and tricks in there for using Revit with any sort of existing building. So TJ is going to go ahead and put that link in for all of you to have, and you can watch that webinar. So when I first saw this question, I said, well, do we have all day to talk about it? Because there really is, there's a lot with Revit that you can do with existing buildings. And yes, there are some tricks that you have to do, a few things that are a bit of a workaround, but if you understand how to do them, like for example, if you have an existing roof that you mentioned and you want to demolish part of it, you do have to have two pieces of that roof. So it has to be two separate roofs so that you can actually keep one and demolish the other piece. We do that a lot with ceilings. I've seen where you have a lay-in ceiling and you may want to keep part of it. You have to duplicate that ceiling and then demolish the part that you don't want. You may have to have some different graphics for that to show a different hatch pattern that's demo versus new. And then so I think that the biggest trick that I always tell people is when you're working with an existing building, you always want to model things as generically as possible until you need the extra detail. Because if you start modeling it too complicatedly and then you need to change it, sometimes these relationships get formed within the model between objects and then they get broken if you try to make something that was complex more simple. So always start very simple and then add the information, the detail as you need as you're going along. And I think, let's see. So really, yes, the biggest question I think from this was demolishing part of something and not part of something else. You do have to have two separate pieces modeled so that you can demolish the piece that you want. The only caveat to that is if you are adding in a door or a window, or like if you're adding in some sort of opening, that will automatically demolish inside of its host. But other than that, if you are demolishing a host family, then you do have to have a separate piece for that. So I hope that helps. And if you have follow-up questions, you can send them our way.
Let me move on to the next question. Thank you, Purvi. This one's for Eden. As we all know, there's been a big transition in Autodesk licensing to named users. And so Eden's going to answer a question we get all the time. Is the only way to reset licensing to have the individual user reset it from the software? Can admin reset it? And Eden wants me to display a new link for that. Another one of our blog posts. All right, Eden,
yeah.
I'll let you talk about this.
Sorry, TJ. Yeah, absolutely. So we get this question a ton, especially now that we're starting to see folks transition fully into the named user subscriptions and the multi-user ones can't be renewed, things like that. We get this question all the time. There is an Autodesk licensing tool that will allow the administrator or whoever to essentially reset licensing per program or for all programs done through command prompt. So you don't actually have to do anything. The user doesn't have to go in. It's a cleaner process. You can throw the tool on something like a network drive, and then you have access to it on all of your machines. You just have to get to them and run it. You do have to run them on the individual machines, which is the bummer there. But it can certainly clean up the process, especially if you're considering having 50 to 100 people reset it themselves and maybe the issues that might go wrong there. This is a better approach to doing that. My colleague Michael has actually written an excellent kind of comprehensive guide to using this tool. I'm sure a lot of you have worked with Michael as well. And this guide is kind of written out of the things that we saw that were frustrating points in the original Autodesk article or unclear. So please take the time if you'd like to just kind of get everyone reset. This will be part of your process, right? Everyone who's transitioning will need to reset their licenses. So it's just a matter of how you want to go about that. And this is a great way for administrators to make sure that it gets done and it gets done on time and everyone is on the same page as easy and hopelessly as seamlessly as possible. So we hope that blog will help out.
Good, thank you, Eden. Yes, certainly this license transition requires assistance. We're here to help, and our team is here to help. And so we're constantly putting out these blog posts to help you with it, making any information we can available. You can call our help desk line, and we're here to help everybody. I just want to mention too that if you have questions right now, you can add them to the questions pane on your GoToWebinar panel, and you'll see a questions pane in there. Feel free to to throw your question right in there. We'll answer it live as we can. If we get too many questions to fill our half hour, we will certainly continue past that half hour. If you need to drop off, no problem. All questions that are submitted to us, we will follow up on. So even if you don't hear it answered today in this short webinar, we will definitely reach out to you to answer that question. So again, ask your questions in the pane, and I'm going to move on to another one that was submitted before, and I'm going to turn this over to Marissa. Marissa, I'm actually going to make you the presenter because I think you wanted to show something. So the question from Chris is, how do you get the layout tools, layout elements, scale bar to show decimal feet as the scale? So Marissa's going to walk you through how this works.
All right, thank you, TJ. Just for those of you who are watching who may not be aware of this functionality, this is something that is in Map 3D as well as Civil 3D. Those of you who have AutoCAD, the AutoCAD toolkit will also have this because you have Map 3D. And that is when you switch to a layout tab, we have an ability in this layout tools to place a dynamic scale bar that will link to a viewport. So the question is, when you choose a dynamic scale bar, and these are actually out of the box, the method when you're placing this, once I select a viewport, forces you to put in what you want the scale bar division to be. I want a scale bar that's going to show me 1 inch equals 40 feet. But this is showing me meters by default, and really the question here deals around the scale ratio that you see down there at the bottom. And can you come in here and add your own scale ratios so that they actually say 1 inch equals 30, 1 inch equals 40? The question the answer to this is unfortunately no. This is hard coded into the program for you to use a scale ratio because they want to make sure that it really is using the units that are set in your drawing versus the units that are going to be here on the piece of paper. So it's important to know there is going to be that sort of multiply by 12 thing, which is why if I want 1 inch equals 40, then my ratio needs to be 1 to 480. Now I'm in feet. Okay, so for those of you who are working with AutoCAD and maybe you're working with architectural units and your units are inches, your ratio is going to be a little different. But here, there's no way to really change that to be that equals that sort of equality scale that a lot of us engineers are used to seeing. You need to be able to enter the scale ratio here, but when you place it in the drawing, it's still going to place it. You're not going to see 480 as that division. You're going to see 40 or 20 or 30 or whatever you set in that particular dialog box. So I wish I had a better answer of yes, you can do it and this is how, but unfortunately the answer is you can't. But as long as you're making sure you're using the right ratio, it's still going to work the way that you want it to work. Okay.
Great, thank you, Marissa. So this next question, I'm going to turn over to you, Chris. I'm going to make you the presenter really quick. And this question is from Derek. How do you change the root file folder structure in BIM 360 after it has been created? Chris, are you there?
Great,
There.
yes, I am. So 1 second, I do apologize. Is everyone able to see my screen?
I think they might still be seeing mine right now.
Oh, there we go. All right, just got the notification. Great question. So yes, so when you're trying to update these root folders over here, of course, whenever we create a new Bin 360 project, you're essentially left with these two, or start with these two sort of folder structures, right? Plans and project files, right? Well, you can actually rename these, right? It's pretty simple. You just come right over here. There's the three little dots here. You can click on that. You can, of course, add in subfolders, but of course you can rename it, right? So then I could say that these are our Revit models. If I could spell models correctly, there you go. Now, the thing to kind of note here is when you're changing these folder structures around and changing these folder names, it's going to take a little bit for Desktop Connector to keep up with it, just because Desktop Connector is trying to synchronize with what Bin 360 is. So for those who might not be aware of what Desktop Connector is, it connects your computer basically, and it treats Bin 360 as a drive in your own computer. So for those bin managers who are using Bin 360 services and don't have Desktop Connector yet, I totally recommend doing it, okay? But a lot of times when we're trying to change out our folder structure and change out what we can do in that location, really the idea here is changing it inside Bin 360 and then having Bin 360, the Desktop Connector, kind of keep up with it. So you can certainly change these root folders. Now, I also recommend that you do this near the beginning of the project. Okay, if you do it in the middle of the project, all of a sudden people are going to be logging in and they don't know what this root folder is. Okay, so just something to keep in mind.
All right, Chris, thank you. Let's move on to the next one. I'm going to switch back to me for now. So Jason, this question is for you. I'm going to tee it up a little bit here. So the question is from Plessy, it sounds like. Enhanced DWG Exporter is an add-in for Revit made by Autodesk. Any good tips on how to make the most of it for our offices that have to use both Revit and AutoCAD simultaneously on a project? Jason, before you answer that, I wanted to just point out that, yes, the Enhanced DWG Exporter for Revit is an Autodesk tool, but they actually hire us to build that tool and to curate that tool. So if you don't know already, CAD Microsystems has built all of these Revit add-ins. You can find them either through this website, biminteroperabilitytools.com, or right through the Autodesk desktop app. The Enhanced DWG Exporter can only be found from this website. It was built by a company in Austria that is trying to meet Austrian standards for DWG files that can be met by exporting from AutoCAD. And really the big issue there is that it allows you to export from Revit. It allows you to export from Revit and maintain things like blocks with attributes. If you've ever exported a DWG file from Revit, you know that it actually explodes all the tags down to circles and pieces of text, and this will maintain them as blocks with attributes. And it gives you some more layer control, things like that. So, Jason, any tips for using this in a workflow?
Thanks, TJ. So my first rude tip, of course, is to stop using AutoCAD, since I'm a Revit guy. But if I'm backing away from that, and honestly, that kind of to make that less rude, you know, I think that kind of lends into kind of how we try to approach most of our engagements, most of our consultings. You know, we try to chip away, ask questions. What is the actual end goal here? What's the purpose? Obviously, there are reasons why two platforms still need to be supported. We've certainly helped organizations kind of transition between that, though, to make sure you can have as few major tools as necessary in there. In terms of the DWG exporter, you know, I don't have a lot of direct experience with it. As TJ mentioned, we manage it, we curate it, we did not develop it. It was very intentionally and purposely devised for one specific function. And then when the benefits were seen, Autodesk realized that it should be just kind of shared for everybody. And so it's kind of built on that initial set of standards and leveraged out there. In terms of using it for overall organizations, you can point everybody's configuration to a central spot. So you don't have to just be tied to your local Windows users directories for those configuration files. So you can go to each one, point to a shared location, and then once it's there, you can take the ones you have, export them to this location. And so any update to those modifications can be made in a central repository, which should hopefully speed up the ability to kind of share those settings and make the settings a little universal. I would say prep your Revit models beforehand as well. Make sure the views are set up actively and consciously with only the things you want to export. And keep in mind, in terms of how it works, it leverages the regular Revit exporter, and then it kind of reprocesses the DWG file. So as much as you can do to get your layer standard set up in Revit before exporting, as much as you can do to get the views set up and the appearance of the elements in the views set up, as you go out of Revit in that first step, it's gonna be a lot less work you have to do in terms of the advanced DWG exporter configuration to get that set up and working. And then you kind of let that tool focus on the individual and very specific things that it does well versus trying to get that to do everything that it needs to do.
Good, thank you, Jason. Let's move on to the next question. It's a little vague, but Marissa and Jason both, I think, want to pipe in on this one. So Marissa, the question from Keith was, what experience do you have with cloud migration and daily activity working in the cloud from a civil perspective?
So from a civil perspective, and the word cloud can mean lots of things. It can mean OneDrive, SharePoint, Dropbox, BIM 360. It can mean lots of different things. We have seen, at least on the civil side, a number of really ranging of who's using what and that sort of thing. We don't have as many people using BIM 360 on the civil side as I would like. Personally, I think that's because we still have quite a few customers that are working on 2019 or before, and BIM 360, that collaboration for civil, really came about with the 2020.2 release. So if you're working in previous versions, you're not gonna be able to do that. So we do still have quite a few customers that are not using BIM 360 and are working more on things like Dropbox or OneDrive. I have seen a lot of people who are actually just working over a VPN and are still VPNing in from their home or wherever they're at to their work network. Transitioning projects to a cloud really depends upon, again, the platform. This was a little bit difficult to know exactly what you're talking about, but there are certain, when you're talking about BIM 360, there are certain rules that you really should follow in terms of what needs to go where, in terms of XREFs versus data shortcuts, and what needs to be uploaded first. So we've definitely seen issues if people are just like, oh, I'm just gonna take the whole thing and just, it's not that simple. You need to make sure it's migrated correctly. So we have seen issues when it's not migrated correctly, especially because you have issues, again, with the data shortcuts and the X reference. The VPN has not been reliable for some people, but for some people it's the only option, because we do have a lot of federal government customers who have to be in their own network and can't be using the cloud very often. Although that's starting to loosen up a little bit, which is nice. Dropbox has been very useful for people. I personally have been using Dropbox with a number of my clients and really have not had many issues. It's just as long as you have the ability to, it's easy to see the versions and to access them back. And, I haven't really seen much lag issue, except, if I'm uploading something very large. But other than that, those are really the observations on the civil side of things that I have. So I think some other people might want to pipe in here as well that are not the civil side.
I'll just tack on some Revit stuff, and I think we talked about this at the last one, but it's definitely worth repeating. Like Marissa said, talking about going to the cloud, there's 20 million ways to work in the cloud, to go to the cloud. For Revit, those Revit central models are very finicky. They're very particular about pathing. They're very particular about how users get to the paths. So I would just kind of, as a general rule of thumb, any sort of syncing application for cloud, like Dropbox, like OneDrive, I think there's a couple of ones out there, that's a big no for Revit files. Working over a VPN to a machine that you have actively in your person, that's probably a big no as well. There's latency issues there that could easily corrupt. VPN to remote desktop, that seems to be fine. Certainly in terms of cloud access for Revit, what we've seen most effective are kind of two solutions. That is a true, pure virtual environment somewhere where the workstations and the servers are all being hosted in the same virtual network in the cloud. Not inexpensive in terms of a solution. The right balance that we have found is BIM 360 design. It's clean, it's effective. It is purposely built for working on those Revit files on the cloud and sharing them with other folks as well. So several ways to kind of tackle that. Some, like I mentioned, Dropbox and things like that, avoid like the plague. But the other ones, it's going to depend a little bit on your workflows and what you're ready to set up and dive into.
Excellent. Good advice from both of you. Let me move forward to the next question. This one's from Rupert. This is for you, Purvi. I use Revit LT 2021, do a lot of renovation residential work. What is the best process to create some of the old 1918 stone wall types for building fronts?
All right, so this question, it's a little open-ended, so I'm going to kind of, give what I kind of think the intent of the question was. So, I guess my assumption is he's meaning the patterns that you see on the wall, because I think that trying to actually model individual pieces of stone in Revit could drive you bonkers, because it's not really made for that, and the kind of rough surfaces. And I would say that you could typically make your own patterns. There's a lot of kind of free PAT files out there. As we all know, AutoCAD PAT files can be used in Revit. There's a variety of plugins, free and paid, that you can use to make your own custom hatch patterns. And so I would just recommend making those hatch patterns that you can. And now with Revit being able to have double patterns, that can help you too, because if you wanted to have see like the stone, and then you needed some other pattern to designate the different kinds of stone, or if you wanted to add a color underneath it or something like that, you could harness that option with that double patterns feature that's inside of Revit from 2019 forward is where that came in. Other than that, I in terms of modeling individual stones, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. You don't really want to model things unless it's really necessary, and you kind of think about the value of modeling the thing and the time it takes versus what you're actually going to do with that particular object. So in an elevation, you just need to see, roughly the pieces of the stone. So a hatch pattern would be fine. In a section, you could create detail components that could show you what the section of the stone looks like in a sort of general rough manner. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I would add, you may find it challenging with these add-ins running Revit LT.
Oh, that's true. I guess you can't use all the add-ins with LT. So that would be an issue. But you could find, but I've definitely found entire libraries online out there for different stone patterns and different brick patterns and things like that are either free or pretty inexpensive. Or if you really wanted, you could learn how to program them, but that's a little more complicated.
Yeah,
we did that back in the day, back in 2008 when I first learned Revit. We all knew how to make our own PAT files out of text files, and it was quite a process, but we did it. So it is possible. With something like a stone pattern, though, I think it would be highly complex to try to program that yourself.
Yeah, it is challenging to do it on your own. I have some experience with that. There are some PAT editors too that are standalone that don't have to plug into Revit or even AutoCAD. Though you may find it easier to find an AutoCAD plugin to generate them than a Revit plugin, since you share the PAT files for the most part between them.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, let's move on. Eden, I'm going to call on you again. I'm going to make you the presenter. I think you have some things you want to show for this particular question. So the question is, it takes a lot of time for us to add and assign users to software one by one. Lots of unnecessary time spent clicking back and forth in the Autodesk account. Is there an easier way?
Yes. Sorry about that, by the way. I think I shared my video chat and it just automatically went to it. Didn't let me select my screen. So yeah, so there was an update recently to the Autodesk account that I think hopefully any admins on the line here will find really useful. Is that before you had to add your users and then assign them separately, and you could bulk import your users, but you would still have to go in and individually click to assign every single software that you wanted them to get. There's a way to do this all comprehensively now, which is really great for any of you just starting the named user transition. If you are in your Autodesk account, which I am right now, and this is new, by the way, the ability for us to share this, so I'm really excited to be able to walk you guys through this. Manage.autodesk.com, if you're an admin, you sign in, any sort of primary, secondary admin, you should have this ability. On the left-hand side, on the sidebar here, go to Buy Product. And then you're going to see a list of your products, available seats, the team that is assigned to. So I'm going to go just into our AEC collection. And just where you would go to assign users, this blue button here, you now have the tab that says Import to Assign. Do that, and you can upload a CSV file. It'll automatically import the members, and it will automatically assign them to the software. So if you're just trying to get a batch of whatever 45 seats of AutoCAD assigned, you have a great and easy way to do that now. You can just collect all of the information beforehand and then just import it. It does take some time. I would note that it took like, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes to process like 2 users when I was doing a really tiny test. So it does take some time, but it's something you can just leave running in the background and you don't ever have to worry about it. You know, going through now and clicking and adding, and it was tedious before, and Autodesk has taken a lot of that feedback and made it easier. So I hope you all find use and take advantage of that.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna recognize here that we're at our time. We're gonna continue moving forward and answering questions. I still have 4 more questions in the queue, and people may be adding more questions. If you have to go, great. We will certainly reach out to you. I do want to kind of talk a little bit about how we can help outside of this webinar. You know, we're a consultancy, and we do a lot of services to help our customers, and that could include many different things, whether it's education, installation, projects, content, standards. All of that is something that we can help you with. Please reach out to us. Let us know if you have any questions on that, and you can contact us many different ways. In the meantime, we're going to continue forward with the remaining questions. So if you have some time to stay, that would be great. If not, if you've posted a question, we will certainly reach out to you with answers to that. So I'm going to turn this over to Chris. Chris, I'm going to make you the presenter in here. And Chris, the question we have is from Joseph. When changing or updating the root folder structure in BIM 360, if you maintain permissions on the main Revit models folder, you don't need to monitor the subfolders, do you?
So, so that's a good question. So when it comes to the permissions, you can actually have the permissions be part of the main folder, and the subfolders here will just update with the main folder. That's really useful, especially when we're trying to set up permissions on a whole project level with many project teams and many project contributors. And that's the idea of BIM 360, right? We have one location that everyone can kind of get into, right? The permission levels are really easy just inside BIM 360 in general, but also too in the subfolders, you can always update the permission levels. So even though I might have access to the root folder, I might not have access to every subfolder. But when you update the root folder, it updates for every subfolder. So that's something to keep in mind. So it's a good question.
So I'm going to keep you on the spot here, Chris. We're going to jump into the next question. And that is from Jonathan. Can you duplicate an MEP fab pipework tag without affecting the parameters of the parent tag within the same family?
You know what? Another good question. Really, the question kind of comes along the idea of what is a tag inside inside Revit. You know, you can have a tag that you can certainly have to be able to tag a certain kind of parameter, right? And that's what really these guys over here on the left-hand side in my properties box are parameters. Now you notice here that it's referencing 1, 2, 3, 4, but over here I don't see any input for that particular parameter. Well, that's because the parameter actually lives and breathes inside what I'm actually tagging, right? So I can certainly double click on the tag and edit it there, but it's gonna edit here inside this family, okay? So to kind of think about it this way, you have to kind of figure out, all right, if I want to tag this pipe here, do I want the tag to be general for, or sorry, do I want that parameter to be general for every single pipe of this type, or do I want this this parameter to be individual or instance based? That's what these parameters over here represent. This is an instance based parameter. So when I type in something like maybe 5568, okay, it updates the tag. Now, the thing to kind of note here is that if I use another tag, it's going to update, or sorry, it's going to tag the exact same parameter. So another thing to note is that you can have other tags attached to this particular pipe just by creating different tag families. And these tags can be things like for elevation, for size, for slope, for things like that. Right now I have this, even though it says a slope tag, right now it's doing item number. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you are trying to tag multiple parameters, you need multiple tags, okay? And you also need to understand that when you're talking about instance-based parameters, this is going to be for the parameter set for the actual pipe itself. You can also have type parameters here that actually are applied to the actual type of the of that particular family, right? So if I have 1,000 or 10,000 pipes of this type here, if I change something here like manufacturer, if I want to type in that CAD Microsystems is a manufacturer here, it will update for every single pipe of that type. So that's just something to keep in mind. I would love to, if I didn't quite get what you're looking for with that question, feel free to reach out to us.
Awesome, thank you, Chris. So we're down to our last two questions, unless anybody wants to post more. I'm gonna switch this over to Marissa. Bear with me one second. I'll take the screen for now, Marissa, so you can talk through this. So the question's from Jonathan again. We recently started a Civil 3D project on BIM 360 to share with the sub-consultant. Can you effectively edit a sheet manager DST file, which is the definition file, on BIM 360?
So this is in reference to Sheet Set Manager. I will say that really BIM 360, when it was introduced, even with the collaboration for civil, didn't really support the Sheet Set Managers. However, there is a new updated version of the desktop connector, and it was released on August 11th. And if you download that version of the desktop connector, you will have more functionality. I will not say that it's perfect, because you will have the functionality to open it, and when you open it and load it up to BIM 360, up to the project, it's going to load all of the files that it references. So that's kind of a new, really helpful thing. But there's still some things that you have to keep in mind about when you've got the sheet set open and then somebody else also has the sheet set open. There's some issues there with locking and not updating necessarily. When you open a file, you know, from the sheet set, it's automatically locked for edit, and that's better than it was before. It didn't do that, and that's part of why it wasn't really supported. But the DST file itself does not lock. So it means that two of you can be essentially doing work on this at the same time. Now, if you both have it open and one of you saves it, the other one, you know, basically the local copy of the DST that you have open, that it's the desktop connector copy that's going to get updated, but you're not going to see those changes until you actually close the program and reopen it. So can you use Sheet Set Manager? Yes. Is it perfect? No, because of the inability to have multiple people editing that sheet set at the same time and the sort of limitations that you have on locking. So there's syncing issues and some locking issues. But that's not to say you can't do it. It really depends upon how you're going to be working with it, how you're going to be working with other people on that project. And if it's not something that you have to necessarily concern yourself with, that multiple people are editing it at the same time, then when you have that desktop connector update for August 11th, it is now considered supported. It's not perfect, but it is supported. So you are going to have some more, you're still going to have some challenges depending upon how you're working with it, but at least it's now supported. Okay, so I hope that was helpful.
I will add to that this whole BIM 360 with Civil 3D is very new. It's new to Autodesk. It's new to all of us. Yes. But I will assure you that it is a top priority at Autodesk, and they have anywhere from 1,000 coders a day working on BIM 360 to improve it. So we get weekly updates on new features, on bug fixes. It's actually hard to keep up with. So if you're running into issues, contact us. We'll let you know what we know and try and help you get through it. So let's wrap up. We have one last question for today, question about coordination. I'm gonna turn this over to Purvi. She'll kick it off. I think we have a few people who want to pipe in on this. So the question's from Damien. I've been having trouble starting up projects for coordination, specifically as a contractor trying to integrate with multiple models. Do you have some reading material I can use to simplify the process or work through it better for initial BIM coordination?
All right, so this is a question that I definitely have heard a lot, and I think that always the biggest issue being the contractor is that for the most part you're coming in at the end and you had little to no control over how the models were created to begin with. Now I think that now versus 5 or 10 years ago, design models are definitely a lot better coordinated than they had been, but they can always get better. So one thing, there's some things that can happen early on if you're lucky enough to be part of the process, which is making sure that there's a good BIM execution plan, that the coordinates are set early on so that everything lines up. But the reason I'm showing Revit here is actually a trick that one of my colleagues showed me a couple of years ago on when you're exporting from Revit to Navis and how to export the coordinates. And he said, I've done this so much that I always export it with 2 different sets of coordinates, and then I bring them into Navis and I see which ones line up. And for each model, it's not always the same. So I just wanted to show where those settings were real quick here inside of Revit. So when you go to File and Export and you go to export it to Navis, right, you're going to have these settings down here. So you're going to look in these settings. Maybe it's not going to, oh shoot, I think because I'm just sharing one screen, it's not going to show this screen. Is it? Move it? No. Okay, one second, TJ. I think I'm going to have to unshare and then share my whole screen instead of just Revit because it's getting mad. So
yes.
Throw it back to me for a second, or actually let me do this. Let me share it. I think you might have to give it back to me again.
You're still presenting.
Oh.
You still have control.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, uh-oh. Now it's spinning.
You broke it.
I broke it.
Here, I'll take it back and then I'll send it over.
Okay. Let's try that. I don't know what I broke. I think I broke Revit. Okay, well, I can talk through it since it's not working now, but when you go to export to Navis in the Navisworks setting, there's actually a setting for the coordinates and it either says internal or shared. And so the recommendation was to export both ways, and then as you link them into Revit, see which ones line up where you want them to be, and see if that makes a difference. The other thing that I typically recommend is to make sure that there's something in the model that you can manually line up so that you can, put them together and then manually move them around once you're putting them into Navis. Make sure you have some grid intersection or a corner of a building or something like that to use in case the actual shared coordinates inside of the models are not aligned with each other. A couple of resources that we have a Navisworks class that's particularly for coordination. It's not free, but it's definitely a good option that teaches you how to use that to coordinate. And then on top of that, Marissa, who's on the panel today with us, along with another coworker, Nick, are doing a presentation at AU about Civil 3D and Revit coordination together. So that might be something helpful from the coordination side to check out, and that is November 14th or 17th to 20th, I think, Autodesk University, and it's free for everyone this year. You just have to sign up, and then you can go to as many classes as you want, and everything is recorded. So if you miss it then, you can watch it later. So I think that's about as much as I can help on.
Autodesk University this year, it's no longer you have to fly to Vegas or fly to London or fly to Tokyo for it. This year, it's all online for the entire world. It is free to everybody. I highly encourage you to register, and it's all on demand. You don't have to schedule time to go see a class. Once you're registered, you can just pick whatever class and watch it whenever you want. So a great resource, and we have a few presentations our team is doing as well. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. We covered all the questions. Thank you everybody for staying with us and going a little bit longer today. We appreciate it. Here's our contact info. If you have anything else, please reach out to us. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for being here.